I'm Clarence Thompson, 73 years old, and I've seen enough in this life to know when something's wrong. This morning I sat in Brewed Awakening, a little cafe on Main Street in my Virginia hometown, nursing a black coffee that burned my tongue just right. The place smelled like roasted beans and warm pastries, the kind of comfort that makes you forget the world's sharp edges for a while. My old army jacket, frayed at the cuffs and heavy with memories, hung on me like a second skin. The bronze star pin on my chest glinted faintly, a quiet reminder of nights in Da Nang when the sky lit up with more than just stars. I was reading a newspaper, but my eyes kept drifting to the young barista Mia, struggling with a tray of dishes that looked heavier than she was. I couldn't just sit there. My knee, still carrying a piece of shrapnel from '68, groaned as I stood, but I shuffled over anyway. "Let me give you a hand, kid," I said, steadying the tray before it crashed to the floor. Her face lit up, all gratitude and relief. "You're a lifesaver, sir," she said, and I chuckled, waving it off. Helping felt good, like I was still worth something. I limped back to my table, ignoring the stares from a few patrons who probably thought I was just some old bum. I'm used to it. Folks see the wrinkles, the cane, and assume I'm nothing but a shadow of who I was. Then I felt it. Eyes boring into me. Across the room, a security guard, built like a linebacker and twice as mean, was watching me like I'd stolen something. His name tag read Derek, and his sneer said he'd already made up his mind about me. I've seen that look before, on bureaucrats who denied my VA claims, on landlords who raised my rent knowing I lived on a fixed pension. It's the look of someone who thinks you don't belong. I kept my head down, sipping my coffee, but my gut twisted. I'd faced ambushes in the jungle, but this was a different kind of ambush, one I wasn't sure I could fight. The cafe was buzzing, folks chatting, spoons clinking, the espresso machine hissing. Then it all stopped. Derek's boots thudded across the floor, each step like a hammer on my nerves. "Hey, old man," he barked, loud enough to turn every head in the place. "You've been here too long. Pay up and get out." His voice dripped with contempt like I was dirt on his shoe. I held up my receipt, my hand steady despite the heat rising in my chest. "I paid for my coffee," I said, keeping my tone calm. "I'm not bothering anyone." He laughed, a short, ugly sound. "You're scaring the customers looking like some homeless guy. Out! Now!" The words hit like a punch to the gut. Scaring the customers? Me, who'd carried wounded boys through gunfire, who'd spent years rebuilding a life after the war took so much. I glanced around, hoping someone would say something. A few folks looked uncomfortable, their eyes darting away, but most just stared, silent. The manager, a weaselly guy named Greg, hovered by the counter, wringing his hands but saying nothing. Spineless. Mia, bless her heart, stepped up. "He's not doing anything wrong," she said, her voice shaking but fierce. Derek turned on her, his eyes narrowing. "Mind your business, kid." She flinched but didn't back down, and I felt a flicker of pride for her. But Derek wasn't done with me. He leaned closer, his breath hot with cheap cologne. "You don't belong here," he said, quieter now, like it was just between us. That's when I felt it. The old anger, the kind that kept me alive in Vietnam, bubbling up, but I swallowed it. I'd learned long ago that fighting every battle head-on gets you nowhere. "I'll go," I said, my voice low. I left a crumpled dollar tip for Mia, though my pension barely covers my bills. As I stood, my cane slipped, and Derek, God help him, grabbed my arm, yanking me toward the door. "Move it," he growled, shoving me outside. I stumbled, my cane clattering to the sidewalk. The door slammed shut behind me, and the street noise, cars, chatter, a distant dog barking, felt like a slap. I bent to pick up my cane, my bad knee screaming, and noticed a few passers-by glancing my way before hurrying off. Nobody stopped to help. I leaned against a lamppost, my chest tight with a mix of shame and rage. I'd fought for this country, lost friends, carried scars, physical and otherwise, and now I was trash to be tossed out. My hands shook as I clenched my cane, the weight of every slight, every dismissal crashing down. Inside, I could see Mia through the window, her face red as she typed furiously on her phone. I didn't know what she was doing, but I felt a spark of hope. Maybe someone would care. Across the street, a young guy in a Marines t-shirt was watching, his jaw tight. He didn't approach, but he pulled out his phone, dialing someone. I didn't know it then, but that moment was the start of something bigger. The air felt heavy, like the calm before a storm, and I stood there, wondering if I had the strength to keep fighting a world that kept trying to push me down. What happened next changed everything. You won't want to miss how this unfolds. The sun was high now, burning my neck as I stood outside Brewed Awakening, my cane digging into the cracked sidewalk. My heart was still pounding from Derek's shove, the humiliation stinging worse than the shrapnel in my knee ever did. I'd faced enemy fire, carried brothers through mud and blood, but being tossed out of a cafe like garbage, that cut deeper than any bullet. Main Street hummed around me, cars honking, folks hurrying by, but I felt invisible. Just an old man in a worn-out army jacket, clutching a cane and a fading sense of worth. I could have walked away, limped back to my one-bedroom apartment with its peeling paint and noisy radiator, but something in me, call it stubbornness, call it pride, wouldn't let me. I'd survived ambushes in Vietnam. I wasn't about to let some bully in a rent-a-cop uniform break me. I hobbled to a bench across the street, my bad leg throbbing, and pulled out my old notebook, the one I used to jot down memories when the war dreams got too loud. I started writing. The date, the time, Derek's name, every word he'd spat at me. My hands shook, not from age but from a fire I hadn't felt in years. I was done being invisible. Inside the cafe, I could see Mia through the window, her face flushed as she typed on her phone. I didn't know it then, but she was lighting a fuse. Her post on a local community group was spreading like wildfire, her words raw and angry. A veteran who helped me was just thrown out of Brewed Awakening for no reason. This is wrong. Locals were commenting, their outrage building. One woman, Sarah, wrote, "That guard's been picking on anyone who doesn't fit his idea of normal for months. It's disgusting." I didn't see it, but her words were reaching people who cared. People like Javier. Javier was a former Marine, 32, built like a tank and twice as fierce. He was at a gym a block away, sweating through a workout with a crew of fellow Marines, some still active, some long retired. He saw Mia's post pop up on his phone and read it aloud, his voice tight with anger. They threw out a Vietnam vet? For helping a kid? His buddies, men and women who'd seen their own share of battles, stopped mid-rep, their faces darkening. Javier slammed his fist on a locker. "We're not letting this slide." They grabbed their gear, their boots already moving with purpose. I didn't know it, but they were coming for me. Back at the cafe, Derek was leaning on the counter, smirking like he'd won a war. "Kept the place clean," he told Greg, the manager, who just nodded, his eyes darting nervously. Greg was a coward, the kind who'd rather let a bully run the show than make waves. The cafe was quieter now, some folks leaving after the scene, their whispers trailing behind. "That wasn't right," one woman muttered, but no one spoke up loud enough to matter. Derek didn't care. He thought he was untouchable. I was still on that bench scribbling in my notebook when a woman approached. Mid-30s, short hair, a fire in her eyes. "Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice gentle but urgent. "I'm Sarah. I saw what happened. Can I talk to you?" I squinted at her, wary. Trust doesn't come easy when you've been kicked around as much as I have. But her sincerity got through. She was a local blogger, she said, fighting for folks who got overlooked. I told her everything, not just about the cafe, but the years of being passed over for jobs, the VA appointments that went nowhere, the landlords who saw my veteran status and raised the rent anyway. "It's not just me," I said, my voice rough. "It's all of us who served and got left behind." Sarah recorded every word, her phone catching the tremor in my voice. I didn't know if it'd make a difference, but it felt good to speak, to let the world know I was still here. As we talked, a low rumble started down the street. I looked up and saw them. 8 Marines, led by Javier, marching in step, their faces hard as stone. Behind them, a crowd was forming, locals, some veterans, some just folks who'd seen Mia's post. They carried signs, handwritten and hasty, "Respect our vets," and "No more bullying." My chest tightened, not with shame this time, but with something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Derek stepped outside, his smirk fading as he saw the crowd. "What's this?" he muttered, his hands twitching like he was itching for a fight. The cafe's windows reflected the growing chaos, and Greg peeked out, his face pale. Sarah kept filming, her voice steady as she narrated for her blog. "This is about justice," she said into her phone. "This is about a veteran who deserves better." Then a news van pulled up, tires screeching. A reporter, Lisa, jumped out, her camera crew scrambling to set up. She spotted me and made a beeline, her eyes sharp but kind. "Mr. Thompson, can you tell us what happened?" she asked. I straightened, my cane planted firm. "I was drinking my coffee, helping a young lady out," I said, my voice steady despite the knot in my throat. Next thing I know, I'm thrown out like I don't belong in my own town. The crowd was growing louder, their chants echoing, "Honor our vets!" Derek, cornered now, shouted, "Get off the street or I'm calling the cops!" But his voice cracked, and I saw fear in his eyes. Javier stepped forward, his arms crossed, his voice calm but deadly. "You got a problem with veterans, pal?" he asked. Derek didn't answer, but his hands clenched into fists. Mia slipped out the back door, joining me and Sarah. She hugged me, her eyes wet. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Thompson," she whispered. I patted her shoulder, my throat tight. "You did good, kid." The street was alive now, buzzing with anger and purpose. I stood there, my notebook still in hand, feeling the weight of every eye on me. I wasn't just an old man anymore, I was a symbol, and that scared me as much as it strengthened me. The air crackled with tension, and I knew something big was coming, whether I was ready for it or not. This is the tipping point. Everything you've been waiting for is right here. Stay with me to see how this fight for justice unfolds. The street outside Brewed Awakening was a living thing now, pulsing with the energy of a crowd that had grown to dozens. Veterans, neighbors, strangers, all drawn by the fire Mia's post had ignited. I stood there, Clarence Thompson, 73 years old, my cane planted like a flag in the cracked sidewalk, my old army jacket hanging heavy on my shoulders. The sun beat down, but I barely felt it. My heart was racing, not from fear, but from something I hadn't felt in decades, a sense that I mattered. The shame of being thrown out like trash still burned, but the faces around me chanting, "Honor our vets," were a balm I didn't know I needed. The Marines, led by Javier, stood shoulder to shoulder across Main Street, their boots rooted to the asphalt. They weren't blocking traffic, not yet, but their presence was a wall of resolve, a silent dare to anyone who'd cross them. Javier's eyes locked on Derek, the guard who'd humiliated me, and I saw the bully shrink under that gaze. Sarah, the blogger who'd recorded my story, was still filming, her phone steady as she narrated for her growing audience. "This isn't just about one man," she said, her voice fierce. "It's about every veteran who's been disrespected." Her words hit me hard, reminding me I wasn't alone in this fight. Inside the cafe, Derek was unraveling. I could see him through the window, pacing, his hands twitching like he wanted to punch something but didn't dare. Greg, the spineless manager, peeked out, his face pale as milk. The crowd's chants grew louder, shaking the glass. "No more bullying!" Derek stormed outside, his bravado crumbling but still clinging to defiance. "Get off the street!" he shouted, his voice cracking. "I'll call the cops!" I wanted to laugh, but the anger in my chest was too heavy. Call the cops? Let him try. Javier stepped forward, his voice low but cutting like a blade. "Go ahead, pal. Let's see who they side with, a bully or a war hero." The crowd roared, their voices a wave crashing over Derek's fading courage. I felt a surge of pride for Javier and his crew, these young warriors who understood what it meant to stand up for one of their own. I'd been one of them once, running through jungles with a rifle, not knowing if I'd see tomorrow. Now, they were here for me. Then I spoke, my voice rough but steady, carrying over the noise. "I didn't fight for this country to be treated like garbage," I said, staring straight at Derek. "I helped a kid in there, and you threw me out because you didn't like my face, my jacket, my age. You think I'm nothing? You're dead wrong." The words poured out raw and unfiltered, each one a release of years of being overlooked, underpaid, dismissed. The crowd went quiet, hanging on every syllable. Even Derek froze, his sneer gone, replaced by something like fear, or maybe shame. A squad car rolled up, lights flashing, cutting through the tension like a knife. 2 officers stepped out, their faces unreadable. My stomach twisted. Cops hadn't always been kind to me, especially after the war when I was just another vet struggling to find work. But the lead officer, a woman with a service ribbon pinned to her uniform, raised a hand for calm. "Captain Ruiz," she said, her voice firm but fair. "We got a call about a disturbance. Someone want to explain?" Before Derek could open his mouth, Mia stepped forward, her hands shaking but her voice clear as a bell. "This man threw Mr. Thompson out for no reason," she said, pointing at Derek. "He's a veteran who helped me, and Derek humiliated him." Sarah handed Ruiz her phone, showing the video of my story. The captain watched, her jaw tightening with every word I'd said about the cafe, the war, the years of being pushed aside. I stood taller, my cane a steady anchor, as her eyes met mine with a respect I hadn't seen in years. Then I heard a voice that nearly broke me. "Dad!" My daughter Ellen pushed through the crowd, her face streaked with tears. She'd seen Sarah's post and driven straight from work. She threw her arms around me, hugging me like I was the only thing keeping her upright. "Why didn't you tell me this was happening?" she whispered, her voice thick. I managed a smile, my throat tight. "Didn't want to worry you, kiddo." She turned to the crowd, her eyes blazing. "My father served this country. He deserves better than this." Captain Ruiz turned to Derek, her gaze like steel. "You're coming with us to answer some questions," she said. The crowd erupted in cheers as Derek, pale and silent, was led to the squad car. His head hung low, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Greg stumbled out, babbling apologies. "We'll make this right, Mr. Thompson," he said, but I barely heard him. My eyes were on the crowd, on Mia, Sarah, Javier, and the Marines who'd stood up for me. For the first time in years, I felt seen. Javier approached, snapping a crisp salute. "You're one of us, sir," he said, his voice thick with respect. I returned the salute, my hand steady, my eyes burning. The crowd began to thin, but Sarah's blog post had reached a national veterans group, and Lisa's news segment was set to air that night. I walked home with Ellen, my steps lighter despite the ache in my knee. I'd stood up to Derek, to the system that had tried to erase me, and I'd won, not just for me, but for every vet who'd been forgotten. Derek would face his reckoning, and maybe, just maybe, he'd think twice before judging another old man in a worn-out jacket.